Hey guys, what's going on? It's the LA Fakers, and we're back with another NFL Nitro video. Today we will be reviewing week 2 of the NFL season, as well as giving our predictions for next week, week 3. Last week was a wild ride. There was a lot of good games. How do you feel about your Broncos taking an L? I
I
think
did not feel good about that at
Daniel
all.
Jones might just be better than Bo Nix, but we'll get to that
Absolutely better
in
than
this
any
video.
Browns quarterback ever.
Not Dylan Gabriel. And let's get into the video, I think.
Well, the first game of the week, Thursday Night Football, was between the Green Bay Packers and the Washington Commanders. And it was yet again another dominant Green Bay victory, winning by 9 points. And, I mean, we just got to talk about it. I think that the Micah Parsons move has definitely helped. He was just dominant as he has been for the Cowboys for years now, and he's really showing out in Green Bay. Still not 100%, yet still cooking the tackles of Washington. I think it's also the rivalry from playing Washington all those years that helps, and he just had it out for Jaden Daniels this game. But before we get into him, let's get into the quarterback of the Green Bay Packers, which was Jordan Love. He once again had a very solid game. He had nearly 300 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, and 0 interceptions. He's been really good to start the season. He could be an MVP quarterback. And all I'm gonna say is every Green Bay quarterback ever who has won a Super Bowl, which is like 3 or 4, were all 27 years of age when they won their Super Bowl. And all I'm gonna say is that Jordan Love is turning 27
Damn.
um, later this
Crazy.
season, so who knows? It could be something. He could be, getting ready for that Super Bowl. But moving on, Josh Jacobs had a very solid game. He ran for 87 yards and a touchdown on 23 attempts, so kind of back to what Josh Jacobs be doing. But the standout, Tucker Kraft, had 124 yards and a touchdown. In fact, at one point in the game, he had more yards by himself than the whole Packers offense. He was just going off, and fantasy players will definitely enjoy. Dontavion Wicks also played pretty well, and Romeo Dobbs caught the other touchdown. But as I mentioned, the man, the myth, the legend, Micah Parsons had he only had half a sack, but he would have had multiple pressures. He was just cooking their left tackle. I don't even know. I think it was Larry Tunsil he was cooking um, all week, and overall the Packers defense just dominated Jaden Daniels. And now moving on to the Commanders. Jaden Daniels played okay, but had a very slow start. Finished with 200 yards and 2 touchdowns, but once again had a pretty slow start to the game, and his team just got dominated at the start. They basically had no run game, and their leading receiver was Zach Ertz with 64 yards and a touchdown, so Unk still got it. And yeah, overall, not too much to say. And also one more thing to say. I think Jaden Daniels got injured, I believe, as well, which is going to force Marcus Mariota to start. I'm not
Oh yeah.
completely sure on that, but yeah, I mean, Washington haven't looked amazing, and now they're without their starting quarterback, so it's going to be a very interesting and probably a bit of a rocky, you know, few games for them.
Moving on to my Cleveland Browns. And it was we lost by 24 points to the Ravens, 41-17. The score makes it seem bad. I promise it wasn't that bad. Um, I thought Joe Flacco, his days are numbered. Just wait until, the Browns are on a real tough stretch. Have like the Lions, the Packers, some tough teams coming up. But as soon as we get past these few weeks, I reckon that is when it is going to be time for Dylan Gabriel to get his start. Because Flacco was terrible. Threw a pick into double coverage, which just was unnecessary. He lost a fumble, which Roquan Smith scored a TD on. Wasn't great. But, there were some bright spots on the offense. I really liked how Judkins played. He had 61 yards and 10 carries, including a 31-yarder, which boosted that up. But he looked really good for someone who's practiced once as an NFL player.
Crazy.
Harold Fannin continued his great stuff. I think we might actually have gotten a a top end tight end, top 16 tight end. He definitely fell further than he should have. He had 48 yards and 5 catches, and is currently one of the top ranked rookies. So that's great. Dylan Sampson also had his first TD on a pass by Dylan Gabriel, who got his first career playtime. He had 3 pass attempts, 3 completions, 19 yards, and 1 TD. I like seeing him play, and I'm really excited for when him and even Shador maybe down later in the season. We know Gabriel's going to be first because it's where all the signs have led to. But I'm really excited to see what Gabriel and Shador can do in the future. Um, I thought our defense played pretty well. Devin Bush was really good. Grant Delpit. Miles Garrett's a monster, even though he might be injured now, which sucks. The problem was the secondary. Denzel Ward, muscle cramps. He missed a lot of the game, and we just had no cornerback depth. Newsom was all right, but outside of him, it was Cam Mitchell gave up 3 TDs, and then it was Miles Harden also gave up a TD. Both of them just were getting cooked. So that's really where the defense, where the loss came from, is Flacco and our secondary on defense. For the Baltimore Ravens, I thought Lamar played a very solid game. I think, his stats weren't crazy. He did finish with 4 TDs because in that second half he was torching the backup corners of the Browns. But it wasn't nothing spectacular. He also had 225 passing yards. He only had like 13 rushing yards. I thought the Browns did a great job at keeping him in. Derrick Henry, there was a lot of talk about what Grant Delpit said about locking Derrick Henry up. And let's just say Derrick Henry may have lost me a fantasy game because he was locked up. I mean, the Browns do this every year. People were surprised, but like we've done this the last couple matchups against Derrick Henry. But he had just 23 yards on 11 carries. I thought Zay Flowers was really good, 7 catches, 75 yards. And DeAndre Hopkins showed that he still has some left in his tank with 2 big catches, one of them being a TD and one of them down on the 1 yard line. Second-year receiver Devontae Walker, who had 2 catches for 2 TDs, 26 yards. He has 3 career catches. They are all touchdowns. Kind of crazy. I thought for the defense, Roquan Smith was cooking us. He was everywhere. 15 tackles, and obviously had the TD. Overall, it was tough as a Browns fan to watch because the defense was playing another good game outside of some of the cornerbacks, and just we got absolutely blown out still. I feel bad for Miles Garrett, but I mean, he's getting paid how much? I shouldn't be feeling bad about him. Tough loss, but whatever. We're the Browns. We're going to have 2 top 10 picks, so I'm fine.
W. Well, moving on, it is another one of your top 10 picks playing against the Cincinnati Bengals. It was the Jags versus the Bengals in a season-altering game. Obviously, kind of crazy to say that in week 2, but just with some of the stuff that happened in this game, it could very well be. But let's just start off with the Jags. Trevor Lawrence had a very Trevor Lawrence game. He had some good moments. He had some bad moments. He threw for 3 touchdowns and 2 interceptions on 270 passing yards. So, overall, he very Trevor Lawrence-like. And Travis Etienne had a very solid game, continuing his actually very solid campaign, his comeback campaign from last year. He had 71 yards on 14 carries. And their leading receiver was PJ Washington with 76 yards. But we just got to get into it. Joe Burrow might be the next Andrew Luck. He was it on a sack? I believe he got injured again. And he has turf toe. He's now out for 3 months, and it requires surgery. I don't think anyone knows what turf toe is, but hey, it's pretty deadly at times. And I mean, obviously Jake Browning has come in the past, and he will do so again. But obviously very bad for the Bengals. They could drop quite a few games. They could drop all 3 or 4, or how many games he won't be playing for. Um, yeah, they could just drop every game potentially. But aside from that, getting back to the game, Jake Browning, the new quarterback, finished with 241 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 3 picks. Obviously, he's a backup. You're not really going to expect much from him. But he has led them in the past, and he did lead them to the win this time. So, he's very capable of doing that. Joe Burrow was going to have a good game, though. He had 76 yards and a touchdown before getting injured. Chase Brown didn't do all that much. Um, Jamar Chase went off as you expect. He obviously had a very off week last week against that Browns defense, um, you know, which should be to expected, by the way, because the Browns defense, I've heard a couple of times now, is kind of good. But Jamar Chase had 165 yards and a touchdown, just balling out. T. Higgins was very nice with 56 yards and a touchdown. And overall, it was a good win for the Bengals. They needed the win because things could get rough for them in the future. Obviously, there's not really too much to talk about with the game. It's just in their future. um, Without Burrow, it'll be interesting to see what happens. And even then, he could get injured. Maybe that turf toe keeps playing up on him. Who knows? It's going to be another, rough stretch for them. Just like they've had a couple of times. But overall, good win for the Bengals.
The next game is the Dallas Cowboys getting a win over the New York Giants in the first overtime game of the season, 40-37 in a shootout. Surprisingly, there was 41 combined fourth quarter points. It was crazy. 7 second half lead changes. And then in overtime there was not much offense. Suddenly 3 punts, and then Russell Wilson ended up throwing his first interception of the game, which led to a game-winning field goal by Brandon Aubrey. Brandon Aubrey might be the MVP for the Cowboys today. He kicked a 64-yarder, that forced overtime, and then he sealed it with a 46-yarder. He might be the best kicker of all time, honestly. I think we'll be saying that soon. But for the Cowboys, Dak Prescott was all right. He put up a lot of yardage, 361 yards, 2 TDs, did have 1 in. Overall, a good game for Dak, continuing on his strong performance last week. Javonte Williams is him. He had 18 carries for 97 yards and a TD. He also had a 30-yarder in there. I think he might be making those Broncos regret getting rid of him. CeeDee Lamb had a better day. He didn't have a bunch of drops. He had 9 catches for 112 yards. Jake Ferguson added 78 yards, and Pickens got into the end zone once with 68 yards on 5 catches. Overall, it was Kevontae Turpin also was having a good game. He had 4 catches for 47 yards and a TD, but he suffered a neck injury, which could see him out for a little bit, which is tough for the Cowboys because he is such a versatile player, obviously a great returner and a good receiver. In other news, Kenny Clark. People forgot that Kenny Clark got traded as well. If this is like the Anthony Davis of the Luka trade, but he had his first career sack for Dallas, so I'm honestly rooting for him. Russell Wilson for the Giants played a much better day this week after we were talking about how he looked terrible last week. Russell Wilson finished 30 for 41, 450 yards, 3 touchdowns. Did obviously throw the game-losing interception. That was crazy. But overall, he played a much better game. Cam Scatterboo got his first career TD in a solid performance where he put up 45 rushing yards. But it was the 2 elite receivers. That's right. Wan'Dale Robinson is elite, at least so far. But the 2 receivers balling out for the Giants. Malik Neighbors had 167 yards, 2 touchdowns on 9 catches. And Wan'Dale Robinson had 8 catches, 142 yards and a touchdown. The duo combined for 17 catches, 309 yards and 3 touchdowns. A crazy performance by them too. And overall, the Giants actually won the yardage battle by about 20 or 30 yards. So I think obviously a good win for Dallas. They were supposed to win this game and they got it done. So I applaud them for that. But I was honestly surprised. I think the Giants offense showed a lot of promise after only racking up 6 points against the Commanders last week.
Well, moving on, it was Ben Johnson going back into Detroit to play his former Lions team, and it was not a good day for the Bears. Getting 52 put on their heads, just an awful, awful game from them. And let's just start with the Detroit Lions. Jared Goff looked like prime Tom Brady out there. He threw 334 yards, 5 touchdowns, 0 picks. He was absolutely dialed in and dominating. Jameer Gibbs had a very nice day with 97 yards on 12 rushes. So he's continuing his elite season that he wants to have. As well as David Montgomery, he also had 57 touchdowns, 57 yards. So he overall had a very good game as well. Amon-Ra, you talk about Wanda Robinson and Malik Neighbors. Well, Amon-Ra and J-Mo are right there. Amon-Ra had himself a day. I nearly got. He had 115 yards and a hat trick, 3 touchdowns, absolutely dominant. And Jameson Williams had 100 yards and a touchdown as well. Just an insane duo. Maybe they might be okay without Ben Johnson. I mean, say what you want about the Bears, their defense is a very good defense, and so to get 52 put on them is actually really surprising, and something I definitely didn't expect. I don't think anybody expected, especially from the Lions without their masterful offensive coordinator. Okay, thanks, bro. And now moving on to the Bears. The Bears. Caleb Williams, he had a very solid day with 200 yards, 2 touchdowns to 1 interception. Overall, pretty solid. Former Lions franchise legend DeAndre Swift had 63 yards and a touchdown, so also a very solid day from him. Rome Odunze has arrived, however. 128 yards and 2 touchdowns from him. An insane receiving performance. And overall, I mean, yeah, it is what it is. It was a blowout, and the Bears will have to learn very quickly from this. And Ben Johnson, it's one of his first games coaching, so you can't expect him to be perfect.
All right, the next game, the New England Patriots beat the Miami Dolphins by 6 points, 33-27, giving the young Patriots their first win of the young season over this mid-Dolphins team. It was Drake May who looked a lot improved from last week. He had 261 total yards and 3 total touchdowns. Rushing-wise, Ramondre Stevenson was the leading rusher with a solid performance, 54 yards on 11 attempts, and he also had 5 catches for 88 yards, getting involved in the air. It was really a lot of Ramondre Stevenson, and I thought Drake May looked a lot better. On their defense, it was Marte Mapu who had an interception, and Milton Williams had a big game. Obviously, a big signing they paid a lot of money for, but he had 2 sacks on the day. For the Dolphins side of things, Tua Tagovailoa had a better performance than last week. The Dolphins at least could move the ball a bit, but overall, not the best. He had 315 yards, 2 TDs, and did throw an interception. Devon A. Chain was struggling to run the ball. He was averaging less than 3 yards per carry, 30 total yards on 11 attempts. But he also got involved in the receiving game quite a bit with 8 catches, 92 yards, and a touchdown. And the 2 Dolphins receivers were, getting the ball a lot more this game and had a much better days. Tyreek Hill had 109 yards on 6 catches, while Jalen Waddle had 68 yards and a touchdown on 5. The Patriots just won it when it mattered. They started the game hot, scored the first 14 points, and then they scored the last 10 points to just secure the win over this Dolphins team. It's a nice step for this Patriots team. I do really believe in them, and I think that they, maybe not this year, but in the near future, are going to be competing for a playoff spot. But also, what the hell is wrong with this Dolphins team? My gosh.
Moving on, it was the return of the Mac and the 49ers getting it done over the New Orleans Saints. And we'll start with the 49ers. Mac Jones returning as a starter in the NFL, well, since last year. I mean, he was starting last year, but that's beside the point. He played a very good game for the 49ers. Started off a bit slow, but got it going. He finished with 280 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 0 interceptions, which is very rare for Mac Jones. So yeah, overall, maybe they found another dog at quarterback. He played very well. Christian McCaffrey had a very solid game, averaging 4.2 yards per carry on 13 attempts with 55 yards. Overall, I just don't think he's going to be the same player he was when he won Offensive Player of the Year a couple of seasons ago, but I still think that, he's got a little bit of juice left in the tank, and, he will still be dangerous. Especially in the receiving game where he had 52 yards, so I mean, let him cook. He's still a dominant force. But their leading receiver was not CMC, it was Juwan Jennings with 89 yards and a touchdown. Ricky Pearsall also cooked with 56 yards. And Kendrick Bourne, I think, had 32. So overall, a very solid game from them, especially without George Kittle. Their quarterback and tight end, they're doing their job, and they were cooking. Nick Bosa also had a sack, so their star players, or what's left of their star players, were definitely playing a good game, and they overall got it done against the Saints. Moving on for the Saints, Spencer Rattler actually had a really good game as well. He threw for 207 yards and 3 touchdowns with also 0 interceptions. So overall, a very solid game from him. Alvin Kamara nearly notched the 100 yards mark, finishing with 99 on 21 attempts, looking like Alvin Kamara in Bengals Saints franchise. But moving on, their leading receiver was their main man, Chris Olave, with only 54 yards, surprisingly, but overall, a pretty solid game from him. Rashid Shaheed, with speed, did very well with 52 yards and a touchdown. Juwan Johnson, who I highly rate and I actually think is a very solid tight end, finished with just under 50 yards with 49. And yeah, overall, a much improved performance from the Saints. There's a lot to like about it. Spencer Rattler could be the guy potentially. Although the 49ers defense isn't that amazing, they both played pretty well. It was overall a pretty solid game. And yeah, I mean, the 49ers just get the job done when it's needed, especially, with that next man up mentality. So overall, a pretty good win from the 49ers.
Intermission. We're in a new season now. We had to stop last night, but we're back the next night to finish this. And where we are up to is the Buffalo Bills. I remember. It's the Buffalo Bills beating the New York Jets 30-10 in a blowout victory. Buffalo got out to a quick 20-point lead in a game that saw both quarterbacks get injured. Justin Fields got injured in the fourth quarter, concussion protocol. Now he's going to miss, I believe, at least next week. I don't know how long exactly he's going to miss, but it was on a Joey Bosa sack, so that sucks for New York. For Buffalo, Josh Allen played through his injury. He was on a run play. He got hurt, I guess. He hit his head, and a lot of blood came from his nose. He had to go out of the game for like a snap, which Mitch Trubisky threw a 32-yard bomb. But then he came back and finished the game out. So good to see he's all right at least. But overall, he didn't play his best. He did enough. He had 148 yards passing and just under 60 yards rushing. While James Cook continues to cook, one of my favorite running backs in the league, probably my favorite right now, honestly. No, Judkins and Sampson. Outside of the Browns running backs, he's probably my favorite. And he had a great day. 21 rush attempts. He had 132 yards and 2 touchdowns. Well, Josh Palmer was actually the leading receiver for the Bills with 47 yards, 2 catches, including that 32-yarder from Trubisky. Overall, the Bills definitely relied on that run game, especially early, and they established it and were able to get a big lead early and carried it all the way to the finish line. For the Jets, Fields was honestly struggling quite a bit before his injury. He wasn't playing like he played last week against Pittsburgh. He was 3 for 11, 27 yards, but he did have 50 rushing yards. He did have a fumble as well. And Tyrod Taylor is now the Jets' starting quarterback. He had a touchdown in the game. It was a rough day for the Jets offense, so Garrett Wilson was the only Jets receiver to get over 10 yards in the game, finishing with 50 yards and 4 catches. Overall, though, a blowout for the Bills and a rough game for both teams with the injuries.
And the next game was a bit of a surprise. The Seattle Seahawks, oh my goodness, dominating the Pittsburgh Steelers at home. At Pittsburgh's home stadium. I forgot what it's called, but
Heinz Field.
30. No, I think they changed it.
They might. It's still Heinz Field to me.
Yeah. But 31 points to 17 in what was a bit of a shocking performance because we obviously expected Pittsburgh to be better. But once again, back-to-back weeks of giving up 30 plus points. And yeah, that's not a good start for the number 1 defense in the league. Well, that's where the money's talking, because they are the highest paid defense in the league. We'll start with Aaron Rodgers. He did not have nearly as good of a game. He threw for 1 touchdown and 2 interceptions. I believe the second interception came in the last play of the game. He threw for 203 yards as well. And actually, Mason Rudolph got into the game with 2 completions for 12 yards. That's perfect football right there, and that's why he should be the starter.
Yeah, it's like Gabriel.
Yeah, the Steelers and Rodgers did not play very well, not as well as last week, and it's showing that A-Rod is a 40-year-old man, and that he's not gonna have it every game. And yeah, moving on from that, Jalen Warren had 48 yards on 14 attempts, so a pretty average game. No one else really did anything on the ground. They had 0 rushing touchdowns. But Jalen Warren, receiving-wise, was very good with 86 yards leading the team. Their next receiver was Pat Frymuth with 31. And surprisingly, DK Metcalf only had 20, but he did have a touchdown. I think the offense's only touchdown, I believe. And yeah, once again, just not a good offensive performance. Well, for the first time this season, not a good offensive performance from them. Hey, Jack Sawyer, just saying, he did get a sack. Ohio State resident, if you will. Moving on though, Sam Darnold came out and threw for nearly 300 yards, 2 touchdowns, but did have 2 interceptions. That's kind of Sam Darnold's game at times. He's a little bit of a gunslinger at times, and he showed it in this game. He was not his best, but he did enough to win, obviously. Throwing for 2 touchdowns is very good. But the main man was Kenneth Walker, who had 13 attempts for 105 yards and a touchdown, 8.1 yards per carry, which Jackson Smith and Jigba continues his good season with 103 yards on 8 receptions. Cooper Kupp actually had a pretty solid game compared to last week with 90 yards. And one of their touchdown grabbers was who was T. Horton?
Tony Horton, I think.
Yeah, I don't know that guy. But he was one of their touchdown grabbers. And Barner, They're like backup tight end. Overall, it was just an amazing game for the Seahawks. They just did their job. They were dominant, and they got the win at the end of the day. And now there's going to be a few questions about Pittsburgh. Mainly, I think their defense, which has been one of their best features of their team, is their defense.
The next game is the Los Angeles Rams starting off well, 2-0, with a win over the Tennessee Titans, 33-19. They trailed by 3 at halftime, actually, and then, the more experienced team just kicked into gear for the second half and was able to pull it out pretty comfortably. Matt Stafford had a very solid outing. He did throw an interception, but he had 2 touchdowns and just under 300 yards. Kyron Williams ran for 66 yards on 17 carries, while Puka actually had a 45-yard rush on the first drive of the game for a touchdown. Blake Corum as well was also good rushing with 44 yards on just 5 carries. But receiving-wise, it was Devontae Adams, one of the best receivers of this generation, who had a big game, 106 yards, 6 catches, and a touchdown. And he also surpassed 12,000 career receiving yards on the day. So, big game for him. And Puka was very solid as well with 8 catches, 91 yards. Byron Young added 2 sacks, as did Cameron Curl, the safety. For the Titans, it was Cam Ward. He played alright. He flashed again. He had a crazy touchdown pass where he threw it to the other side of the field. It was crazy. He finished with 175 yards, 1 touchdown. Did lose 1 fumble, but didn't throw an interception. And 175 yards. Overall, a very solid performance for their number 1 overall pick. Well, Tony Pollard got off for 92 yards on 20 carries. Calvin Ridley was the leading receiver for the Titans with 57. Well, Ayomino had 56 yards and a touchdown. And Cody Bond had that 1 interception for the Titans defense. In the end, it was a fairly dominant outing, at least in that second half for the Rams, who totaled almost 200 more total yards of offense than the Tennessee Titans. And I think we just kind of saw how, far apart these 2 teams are. The Rams consistently in the playoff hunt and in the playoffs. And one of the most experienced teams in the NFL against one of the youngest. So a bit of a mismatch, and we saw it there today.
The next game was my Denver Broncos going down to the Daniel Jones led Indianapolis Colts, 29 points to 28 in a heartbreaker. Let's start with the away team, with my Denver Broncos. Bo Nix had a pretty solid game. He threw for 200 yards, 3 touchdowns and 1 interception. He actually started on fire with in the first half with 150 yards, 3 touchdowns, 0 picks, but obviously in the second half struggled quite a lot more. Only throwing for about 50 yards, 0 touchdowns and 1 pick. Overall, it was rough out there. Bo Nix hasn't had the best start. This was definitely a better game for him, but not the best start to the season, as you'd hope. But, we are also playing maybe the greatest Colts team ever all of a sudden. They are just a really good football team at the moment. But moving on, J.K. Dobbins had a very solid outing with 14 rushes for 76 yards and 1 touchdown. He was overall pretty effective, and I was happy that he got a rushing touchdown. We actually didn't see much of R.J. Harvey, only having 5 rushes for 8 yards, which is just not a very good game. But obviously, he's a rookie. He's not going to get in every game. I wish he did, though, because he's honestly a really cool player, and I really like him personally. And I hope we see more of him. But it was the Troy Franklin breakout game. I've been waiting for it for a little bit now, and he played really well. He had 8 receptions for 89 yards and a touchdown. That's a very serviceable game. And our next leading receiver was actually Marvin Mims with a 24-yard touchdown, and that is about it. The rest of our players, no one had over 20 yards. Cortland Sutton, as you would know, having him on your fantasy team, only had one catch for 6 yards and was actually getting locked up. And yeah, not a great game for him. PS2 didn't even have that good of a game, being our leading tackle. Anyways, but moving on to Daniel Jones, who once again, this team is the greatest offensive team potentially ever. Not stats wise, but the fact that I don't think they've punted once this season, which is insane for sure in this era of the NFL. Danny Dimes threw for 316 yards, 1 touchdown, 0 picks. Didn't light up the stat sheet, but he played a very safe, sound football, which is exactly what the Colts need. Anthony Richardson obviously took a lot of risks, and the Colts didn't play well off of that. They needed someone who could just drive them down the field, and that's what they've got. They've got a guy who can just do that, make the safe throws, and they'll just, keep tacking on points whenever they can. But, it all was through Jonathan Taylor, who had a monstrous game, 25 rushes for 165 yards, and actually no rushing touchdown, but he did have a receiving touchdown, and also 50 receiving yards. He was a monster. But the leading receiver for the Colts was actually Tyler Warren. He had 79 yards in his, and, he's a prospect that I've actually liked quite a lot. I believe I had the Jets making him at number 8. I do think that Indianapolis was just about the perfect spot he could have gone to. And, under Danny Dimes, he actually might be a really good tight end. And, I don't think he's going to be quite Brock Bowers, but, hey, I think he's going to be pretty solid overall. Their next leading receiver was Alec Pierce with 68 yards. And Josh Downs did have 51 to tack on as well. And yeah, just overall was a very good game for the Colts. Again, they just got a suffocating offense. They will just take time and they will tack on points whenever they can, which is every single time. And obviously, it's an ethical offense. And
So I enjoyed that, but the next game is the Arizona Cardinals pulling off a win by 5 points against the Carolina Panthers. They held on late, unfortunately, and both of us picked the Panthers, and it was close. But Carolina actually led 20-3 at halftime. They dominated early. Well, really, their defense dominated early, and Kyler Murray had a solid outing, had an interception, 1 TD, and 250 total yards, while James Conner averaged just over 3 yards per carry, but did rush for 1 TD on 11 carries. Trey McBride, one of the top tight ends in the NFL, had a solid game, 6 catches for 78 yards. Well, unfortunately, Marvin Harrison Jr. was kind of quiet, only 2 catches for 27. I was hoping he'd build on week 1, but they just weren't really getting it to him. Their defense, though, it was dominant from everyone. They had 10 pressures on Bryce Young. And the offense was steady enough to convert those into points for the Panthers. Calais Campbell finished with 2 sacks for Arizona as well. He was yep, for real. The first 2 drives of the game for Carolina went like this. First, it was a fumble by Bryce Young on a Josh Sweat sack. And then the second one was Bryce Young getting absolutely decked from an unseen defender, which Baron Browning, Broncos legend, ended up intercepting. So it's just terrible start for them, especially those first 2 drives. And they couldn't quite recover. Bryce threw the ball 55 times. He had 35 completions, 328 yards, 3 TDs, 1 int. I thought outside of that side, it was actually pretty good, though. Ted McMillan looks like he is a future superstar receiver. He had 100 yards on 6 catches, including 75 of those in that first half. And the Panthers, they finished the game with the last 21 points, but it just wasn't quite enough. Great game for the Cardinals defense. A solid game to watch, honestly.
the next game was the Super Bowl rematch, the game that everyone wanted to see, everyone was hyped for. I'm like, I think it actually was probably the least anticipated Super Bowl rematch, maybe of all time. It was not, and it lived up to that. It was not a very good game. It was very boring. Both style of teams this year have been kind of boring, to be honest, and have not been the best, and this kind of proved it. The Eagles did end up squeaking out the victory 20 points to 17 in Kansas City as well. We'll start off with the defending champs. Jalen Hurts once again went for basically, he barely got over 100 yards, which I think he also did last week. He barely did that as well. Um, and I believe his longest pass was or pass completion was 25 yards or something. It was not very good, and they are definitely not an air raid team like the Colts or other teams. And overall, yeah, it was just a struggle for both teams offensively. It was a very defensive-driven game. But Saquon Barkley played pretty well compared to last week. He had 88 yards and a touchdown on 22 attempts. So they were definitely, using him a lot more. And overall, he was doing a very fine job. Jalen Hurts also did have his rushing touchdowns. He, let him cook on 15 yards. And overall, yeah, the offense didn't really perform well. As you would know, AJ Brown only had 27 yards, which is not very good for a wide receiver one. He's definitely one of the worst wide receiver ones in the league, I guess. And it's not really his fault either. I'm looking at production. He's like the least productive wide receiver one outside of Portland Suns, basically. Portland Suns sucks, so.
Yeah.
But Devontae Smith was the leading receiver with 53 yards. So, overall there's not really much to even talk about with this game, to be honest. It was just a slugfest and a really boring game overall, and both offenses kind of sucked. But moving on to, maybe for the first and only time this season, I will say it's the better offense, the funner offense, led by Patrick Mahomes, who threw for 187 yards, 1 touchdown, and 1 interception. That's kind of just the Patrick Mahomes that we've come to know. He wasn't the best, but he also wasn't the worst. He was smart with the football. But where he was really dangerous was actually on the ground. He was the team's leading rusher with 7 attempts for 66 rushing yards and a touchdown. He may have to convert to running back. I mean, he was very good, and this is what he can do to teams, When they're not paying attention to him running, he can run on you. And he did that to the Philadelphia Eagles. He ran on them all night, or all day. And yeah, the next leading rusher was Kareem Hunt with 31 yards. Isaiah Pacheco also got in there for 22. But overall, no real standouts, to be honest, offensively. Travis Kelce was a standout for another reason, though. Because he was getting mad and heated on the sidelines. I think he was yelling at Patrick Mahomes. Once again, dropped a touchdown like he did last week. Well, he could have caught it and ran in for a touchdown, but he did drop it. And I believe that happened last week on the goal line against the Chargers as well. And he was seen visibly upset with Patrick Mahomes. He did end up having a solid game with 61 yards overall, though, and being the team's leading receiver. The only touchdown getter, receiving-wise, is it Torrey Thornton? I actually don't know this guy's name either. I don't really care about this.
Tyquan Thornton.
Tyquan Thornton.
He's a dog. I actually like him.
He's alright. He had 59 yards and a touchdown, so overall, it was a solid game. There's not really much to be said about this game. It was just there. And yeah, good on Philadelphia for owning the Chiefs again.
The next game
Damn.
is the Atlanta Falcons beating the Minnesota Vikings 22-6, and a game where the Falcons defense was dominant. In previous years, the Falcons have consistently had one of the worst pass rushes in the NFL. However, it did not show this week. They had 11 QB pressures and 6 total sacks on the rookie was saying rookie, JJ McCarthy. It was Zach Harrison and rookie Brandon Dorless who combined for 3 of those sacks. And I thought Billy Bowman Jr., who is a 4th-round DB they drafted, was really good. He had 2 pass deflections and a crazy athletic interception where he did not have positioning. I don't know how he ended up with it, but it was one hell of a play. Um, but yeah, overall the defense played great. They forced 2 interceptions and 2 fumbles. And offensively for the Falcons, the run game was the key, as we've seen a few times this week. It was Bijan Robinson, who is obviously an elite player. He had 22 carries for 143 yards. Well, one of the most underrated backup running backs in the league, Tyler Algier, added 76 yards rushing on 16 carries and a TD, meaning they combined for 219 rushing yards between the 2 backs. Michael Penix was solid with 135 yards, but they weren't passing the ball very much, as previously stated. Drake London was the leading receiver, though, with 49 yards on 3 catches. Some worse news for the Falcons is that AJ Terrell injured his hamstring, so hopefully that's not too bad. But yeah, bro,
Yeah.
this has just been this dude was just trashing his teammate, calling them sister bear since their name's brother bear. That was crazy. He
Yeah,
was
I noticed that
flipping
they were
out.
fighting when he just didn't move.
He was flipping out at him when he wasn't moving. That's why.
That's a W right there.
For the Vikings, JJ McCarthy came back down to earth for this game. He was struggling, obviously, under a lot of pressure from the Falcons defense, but he fumbled once and he threw 2 interceptions, 158 passing yards. And their run game struggled as well. Jordan Mason had 9 carries for 30 yards. Overall, just not a good day for the Vikings at all. Justin Jefferson was the only receiver to get 32 or more yards, with 81 yards total on 3 catches, which is boosted by a 50-yard catch. And even their punt returner Miles Price muffed a punt, which was recovered by the former Brown cornerback Mike Ford. Shout out to bro. But it was just nothing was going right for the Falcons in this one. The Falcons dominated with their elite defense, or with a great defensive showing and their elite ground attack. And they made JJ look really uncomfortable in this one, and that was the key to their success in this game. So nice look for the Cardinals after a pretty bad week 1. Oh, Falcons. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'd just like to say that's the second time you've done that now. You in the Panthers Cardinals game, I didn't say anything, but you said that the Panthers dominated or something. Like the Panthers were up 20-3, I think, even though they never
It was the other
obviously
way.
weren't. And
Yeah.
then he just did it. Then he just said the Falcons got dominated, and then in the same sentence went that the Falcons dominated. He just flipped it
That's
around
crazy.
like instantly.
Well, I meant
You
the
literally.
Vikings got dominated. Man, I'm sick right now, bro. That's what I'm
I
telling
can
you.
tell.
I'm good, though.
Well, you're gonna be sick after hearing the stats about your former Browns in this one.
No, I'm
As
gonna be
it
happy.
was the former Brown Bowl between
Yeah.
Nick Chubb and Baker Mayfield. Baker going into Houston and beating the Texans 20-19. Mr. Dog Man himself, Dog Pound. Anyways, let's start off with the Houston Texans, the home team. CJ Stroud had a pretty solid game. He threw for 207 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 touchdown, 0 picks, sorry. And overall, it is very, it is showing that their offensive line isn't the best, and he's not having the best season. You know, I don't think it's necessarily a sophomore slump, but it's not. But it's not in his sophomore season, but you know, I don't think that he's a bad quarterback. His offensive line isn't helping, and I think that they just simply need to build chemistry and just, you know, get more reps with each other. And I do believe that things will get better for the Texans, but as of now, they are a bit of a struggle. And I believe they're 0-2 at the moment. Um,
Yep.
yeah, and I mean, yeah, CJ Stroud is definitely missing throws though. He's not as good as he was, as electric as he was in his rookie season, but he's still pretty good. Nick Chubb, Unk has kind of got it. He had 12 attempts for 43 yards and a touchdown, the go-ahead touchdown to put the Texans up before Baker Mayfield did Baker Mayfield things. And overall, he's played I think about as everyone has expected. Not great, but not the worst either. For Joe Mixon, obviously. Nico Collins had 52 yards and a touchdown and was the leading receiver for the Texans. A pretty not Nico Collins game. I feel like he normally goes for 100 in these games, but things are still getting figured out. It's a new season at the end of the day, and Nico Collins can't be the best player ever every game. And yeah, who was M Marks?
Who?
I apologize. M Marks, who's a Texans
Who?
wide receiver. Yeah,
They have a lot of receivers injured.
they do. Well, I apologize, M Marks, for not
Oh,
knowing
Woody
your
Marks. The running
name. Oh
back.
wait, it's Woody.
Yeah.
Oh, he
He's
is
a
a running back. I apologize. Woody Marks was their second leading receiver with 37 yards. And Nick Chubb was even the third leading receiver with 29. So overall, this shows they've basically got no wide receivers. They're using all the running backs that they can. But overall, a solid game, and they're definitely missing a lot of people, and yeah. But moving on, the Buccaneers. Let's start with the man, Baker Mayfield, who had quite an eventful day, and obviously another very good game for him. He threw for 215 yards, 2 touchdowns, 0 picks. A very solid game from him, and he started this year on fire. He's been one of the best quarterbacks since joining the Buccaneers. He's been very underrated. Has taken them to playoffs, obviously, and once again playing very well in another game. Obviously, as I mentioned, he did end up having the drive, which they scored a touchdown in, or the game-winning drive, I should say. But Bucky Irving, continued being pretty good, pretty productive. He had 17 attempts for 71 yards. Rashad White had actually a really good game with 10 attempts for 65 yards and a rushing touchdown. Baker Mayfield also tacked on 33 rushing yards. Mike Evans, once again, had a solid game with 56 receiving yards. The next leading receiver was Bucky Irving with 50 yards. And Sterling Shepard also tacked on 34. Overall, the game was a very topsy-turvy game, a lot of different score changes. But overall, a very solid game for one of the last games. I think we got one more game. So one of the last games of the week, and overall was a pretty solid game. And the Bucks get the win and start 2-0.
Yep. Let's go Baker Mayfield. The final game was the Los Angeles Chargers starting 2-0. They might be the best team in the division. I am starting to believe so, honestly. They beat the Raiders 20-9 in a game where they just kind of dominated, especially the defense just didn't let Geno get anything going. But we're gonna start with the Chargers. Herbert had another very solid game with 242 yards and 2 touchdowns, and he also added 30 yards on the ground. Outside of him, their run game wasn't really there. Najee Harris had 28 yards on 8 carries, while Amarian Hampton had 24 on 8 carries also. But receiving wise, Quinton Johnston was the leading receiver, 71 yards, 1 touchdown on 3 catches. While Keenan Allen continues his good start to the season, he's showing he might still be a solid receiver in the NFL. He had 5 catches for 61 yards and a touchdown. Um, for the Raiders, Geno Smith put in one of the worst QB out, probably the worst QB outing so far this season. Well, yeah, I'd probably say so. I mean, JJ McCarthy was pretty bad this week too, but he threw 180 yards, 3 interceptions, no touchdowns. The offense didn't score any touchdowns the whole game. Ashton Genty had a very alright game. He didn't do much of anything. He had 11 carries for 43 yards. I feel like 11 carries isn't really enough for how good Ashton Genty is. I know he hasn't been all too amazing, but he's played 2 career games. So I feel like they need to try and get him the ball a bit more in the future. Jacoby Myers though, was their leading receiver, 6 catches, 68 yards. Well, Brock Bowers, who was questionable going into the game, ended up playing and putting up 38 yards on 5 catches. Overall, it was a great win for the Chargers, who are 2-0 now. As previously stated, they had over 100 more yards, and their defense was just cooking the Raiders. They couldn't get much going offensively. I think the AFC West is turning out to be a very interesting division, with the Chiefs having a tough start with tough teams to play, and now 0-2. The Chargers starting well and beating the Chiefs in one of these games. Meanwhile, the Raiders have just been doing what the Raiders always do, and the Broncos suck. So very interesting in the AFC West. In the AFC West. But that being said, that's all our predictions, all our reviews.
Yes, sir. And now on to the predictions.
Yeah, last week we both got 12 correct. I got the Colts, you got the Eagles. That was our only difference.
Yes, sir.
But yeah, do you want to start it?
I'm down.
Yeah.
The first game. What does Snowman? Okay. The first game of the week is a Bird Bowl game. Get hyped, everyone. It is the Seattle Seahawks going into Arizona and taking on the Arizona.
Yeah, ahead a week.
My apologies. The first game of the week is the Miami Dolphins, the struggling Miami Dolphins, going into Buffalo and taking on the Buffalo Bills. Yeah, there's nothing really much to be said. Give me the Bills.
Yeah, that's fair. I'm not sure really how this is Thursday night football, but it shouldn't really be close. It's in Buffalo. I will say, by the time this video is out, the game's probably already happened, but we're recording before that game happened. So, then again, though, I think it's pretty obvious that we would have picked Bills anyway. But moving on, it is the Carolina Panthers taking on the Atlanta Falcons in Carolina. Do I do it again? I'ma do it. Give me the Panthers. This is the week Bryce Young finally breaks through. I think if they can just bring that momentum from that end of last game, they are a real chance. Obviously, Atlanta is not going to be easy to stop with how good Bijan was last week, and their defense was amazing. So it's going to be a tough game, but I believe in the Panthers.
I mean, I believe in them, but at the end of the day, they aren't the strongest team. And I really liked what Atlanta did. They played really well and really dominant. I just think that they can replicate that again. Obviously, it's not in Atlanta this time, which is a bit tougher, but I do think that Atlanta can pull out the W.
Chargers play Broncos. That's awesome.
That's awesome.
I can't wait to talk about that one.
Moving on, it is the Green Bay Packers going into Cleveland and beating them by a record 67 points in a blowout. Oh my goodness, Michael Parsons will go for 4.5 sacks in this game. Absolutely dominant. Give me Green Bay.
I will say, Myles Garrett and Denzel Ward are both questionable. So if they don't play, there's a real chance that happens. But I think this is going to be actually pretty close, you know. The Browns have a good defense.
Like it was last
it was close until Joe Flacco ended it. Yeah, the Packers are gonna pull away though because Joe Flacco is terrible. So I have to go with the Packers here. It should be close, but I will be watching. The next game though is a divisional matchup, an interesting one. It is the Houston Texans at the Jacksonville Jaguars. This is a bit of a tough one for me. The Jags are favorites, however, I think I'm gonna go with the Texans here. I do think the Jags have played pretty well recently. They didn't play great week 2, but I'm really hoping the Texans can pull this out for that Cleveland draft pick. I do think there's a real chance if CJ Stroud can just get a bit more time to throw this week, then the Texans offense might be able to get it going a bit. And so I definitely think they are a good chance in this one, and I am going to take them.
I agree with you. I just think that the Texans wouldn't, be licking their lips. I think that they'll really want to get a win on the board and they'll be hungrier for this one. And yeah, give me the Texans. But the next game is the Minnesota Vikings hosting the Cincinnati Bengals in Jake Browning. Honestly, this is actually a really tough one for me.
Or,
Jake Browning I think is a solid quarterback.
that's
JJ,
fair.
but I'm gonna go the Vikings. I do like, I don't know. There's something about the Bengals that I feel like that they could pull it out, but ultimately, they do not have a very good defense, and I do think that JJ McCarthy will have a better week on that defense than he has in previous weeks. So give me the Vikings at home as well.
Well, I am actually going to be taking Cincinnati in this one. I think that I do agree that the JJ will have a better game. Jake Browning, we saw it, what was it, last year? It might have been the year before. But he came in and actually was lighting it up. Last week he was throwing a lot of picks, but throwing a lot of TDs. I think they have a real chance. And I think that if they just rely on that elite receiving game and just let um Jake Browning just chuck it up consistently, they'll have a real chance because JJ might struggle to keep up with that offense. So I am taking the Bengals in this one. But the next one is the New England Patriots at home against the Pittsburgh Steelers, both 1-1. And I did not like what I saw from the Steelers, and they are also missing. They're not missing anyone. Never mind. For some reason, I thought Fields was on the Steelers again.
That's
But
crazy.
I am taking the Patriots. I think that they are a better overall team. I think they look pretty good. A lot of their talent showed last week. Specifically, I liked how their defense looked at times, and it's intriguing to see how Aaron Rodgers will play because week 1 he was amazing, week 2 he was the opposite. So yeah, just depends what side of the spectrum he's on for this game. But I'm going to be taking the Patriots.
I tend to agree with you. I actually don't know how the Pittsburgh Steelers are kind of favorited in this. I think that, New England, they're obviously a young team, and I think that they're a team that'll just get better week in, week out. Drake May will probably have a pretty good week again. Then again, he hasn't played the toughest of defenses to start, so, there's that. But I do think that the Patriots will win, especially at home. But the next game is actually a really tough game for me. I have Philadelphia because it's in Philadelphia, but I could very easily see the Rams winning this one. I have not liked how Philadelphia have played. They've gone with the Chiefs playbook of just winning no matter what, not winning very well, but winning games regardless. As Chris Jones kind of said last week, I didn't mention it, but he did taunt Jalen Hurts, and Jalen Hurts did clap back at him, so some interesting stuff there. And I mean, Chris Jones isn't wrong. The Eagles do not win very well, but neither do the Chiefs. But regardless, give me the Eagles.
Yeah, I have to take the Eagles as well. In the end, how much does your yardage matter when every third and fourth down you just push for a first down? I think the Eagles are just going to be unstoppable this season, even if they don't look the funnest. They're just going to be able to get it done. The Rams, this will be a good game because the Rams made it a really good game in the playoffs last year. So, but the next game is Baker Mayfield against Tyrod Taylor. Hold on. I swear. Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna be taking the Buccaneers in this one. They looked really good last week, and I'm not a Tyrod Taylor believer. I don't know what you want from me. This feels pretty obvious. I was excited a bit by the Jets week 1, but it's kind of unfortunate the Fields is hurt. Yeah, that's just how it goes sometimes, I guess. The Bucks looked really good as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate. I do think that Tyrod Taylor will be a safer quarterback than Justin Fields. I think that he'll. I maybe it's just because I like him. I actually really like Tyrod Taylor as a quarterback. He's just a solid quarterback, and that's all he has been. Maybe he's what the Jets need, but ultimately, I don't think that he'll be. He'll have enough juice to get it done. Unfortunately, so yeah, give me the Tampa Bay Bucks in Tampa Bay as well. The next game is the Indianapolis Colts, the NFL's hottest team, going into Tennessee to play the Tennessee Titans. And do you believe in Indiana Jones? Because I do. I think that the Colts can get it done over Tennessee. Tennessee are definitely a better team. Obviously, their record isn't great, but they are definitely a better team than last year. Although that's not hard to do, but I do think that that
Cam Ward.
Cam Ward can get the job. Can do a very solid job. He did throw his first passing touchdown last week, but overall, this Colts team is going to be playing with so much flair, so much confidence. I mean, they had their top 2 corners out last week and completely locked up the Broncos' main wide receiver core. So, they're definitely going to be confident. So yeah, give me Indianapolis.
Now, I do want to point out that the New Orleans Saints started last season 2-0 with a perfect offense as well. So,
I wasn't gonna bring that up.
I
I
just
did have
wanted
that
to
in the
bring it.
back of my mind.
But I do believe that this Colts team is different. I don't think they're going to be perfect this season, but I think it's just O-line play that is the biggest thing. They have one of the best O-lines in the league, as they have had for years. And ultimately, I'm going to take them over the Titans. The Titans, I mean, they've got to get their first one eventually. I'm not sure it happens here. They're lacking in a lot of areas, and they're really young. So I am going to have to go with the Colts here. But the next game is a bit of an interesting game. It's 2 1-1 teams. It's the Washington Commanders at home against the Las Vegas Raiders. And did Jaden Daniels get hurt? Or not?
He did. Marcus Mariota is starting.
Oh my gosh. I think Marcus Mariota might be better than the Geno Smith we saw last week. But I was gonna pick Commanders. I'm gonna pick the Raiders here. Honestly, the Raiders haven't been as good as I was expecting in the preseason, but they've been alright. Geno Smith was obviously horrible last week. I think he can bounce back a bit though. I hope he can bounce back for his sake. And yeah, because Jane Daniels is out, I'm gonna have to pick against them here.
Yeah, well, it's Marcus Mariota's season, I think. I do actually think Washington can get the job done. I don't know. It's just at home, Washington, needs something. They know that damn. They know that they need some juice, and they, have started this season pretty flat. I think that Marcus Mariota could actually jumpstart their season a little bit. And then when Jaden Daniels comes back, maybe Jaden plays a little bit better. But yeah, give me Washington in this one. But moving on, it is my Denver Broncos going into Los Angeles and taking on the Chargers, where I have the Chargers winning. This Broncos team has not been up to the hype that they were. It is a young season, it is early, I'm not worried too much, but we haven't looked the best, and I don't think we've looked nearly as good as the Chargers, but, it is a divisional game at the end of the day. Divisional games are tougher. I do think we will play tougher, but ultimately I don't think we'll get the job done. you know, they did beat the Chiefs in week 1, so they are a pretty damn tough team. So give me the Chargers.
But you beat the Chiefs in week 18. You beat Carson Wentz. So.
Dominated. I think you meant.
I'm also taking the Chargers. I do think this will be actually an interesting game. I think this will be a close one. That the Chargers finish late with a late score that ends up giving them like a 10-point victory or something along those lines. I'm just much
Maybe
more
a field
confident
goal
in them.
after a miss.
Well, maybe you shouldn't be cheating, and then that wouldn't happen.
Cheating. Did you see the leverage call? There was absolutely zero leverage taken. It was
Man,
a bogus call.
that's cap. Miles Garrett
Cap.
jumped over a man. Why couldn't he just do that? Jump over the center.
Because that guy is not. That guy was like 500 pounds. He
Miles
was
Garrett is as well.
160.
Miles Garrett's not 160. Okay.
Sorry, like 170.
Alright.
My bad.
Did I finish what I was saying about the Chargers? I don't remember.
I don't think so.
I've trusted them a lot more so far. Justin Herbert has looked really good, and Bo Nix might be in a bit of a sophomore slump early at least. So yeah, give me the Chargers. But the next game is the Seattle Seahawks at home against the Saints, and I am pretty comfortably taking the Seahawks. I have not liked the Saints really at all. Ryla did play pretty good last week. I did kind of forget about that, but Sam Darnold played great as well, and the Seahawks run game looks pretty good with the 2 running backs. So I'm gonna take the Seahawks in this one.
Yeah, I agree. You know, if it was in New Orleans, it would be interesting, but it is in Seattle at the end of the day, and I don't think that the Seahawks will want to give away a game to the Saints in Seattle. So give me the Seattle Seahawks. And I don't think Spencer Rattler is going to be as good. But moving on, it is the. I need to pull it up. Hold on, let me get that saved. And then get killed. It is the Dallas Cowboys going into the Chicago Bears. And give me the Dallas Cowboys. They have not played very well, but they've played a lot better and a lot more competitive than the Bears. You know, new season, same Bears is basically what it's turning into at this point. I don't know where they go from, you know, getting 52 points put on them. I'm not sure what Bears team will show out, if it'll be a good Bears team or a bad Bears team. I know a lot more about this Dallas team, and that I think that they can pull out this game. Not convincingly, but you know, they'll do the job as they tend to do.
No!
So, yeah, give me the Dallas Cowboys.
I know the Bears looked pretty bad last week, but they were playing a really good team, and I don't think the Cowboys are close to that level. So I'm going to be taking the Bears in this one.
Bearsies.
But the next game is the Arizona Cardinals at the San Francisco 49ers. And while the Cardinals look bad in week 1, they looked a lot better in week 2. Brock Purdy is questionable, and I believe is going to miss this game. We'll have to wait and see, I guess so. But yeah, I'm going to be taking. I trust the Cardinals based off of how they played week 2. Who knows if they look like week 1 form again, but both teams are actually 2-0, which is kind of surprising.
Both teams beat the Saints. Let's relax.
Well, they looked a lot. Yeah, but they looked a lot better last week. So
Yeah,
maybe
but
an
Mac
actual
Jones
team.
is back.
Mac Jones sucks.
One looked good against the Saints, the other one didn't. And in my opinion, that's why I'm taking the 49ers.
Because they beat the Saints better.
Because they beat the Saints better. And I believe in Mac Jones, you know. Mac Jones just needed to go to the Bay. He's just like Joshua Dobbs who needed to go to the Vikings. I think that Mac Jones just needed to go to the Bay. And I think that the 49ers could pull out the W. You know, they're two very interesting teams. I can easily see this being a Arizona win, but give me the 49ers. And the second last game of the week is the Kansas City Chiefs traveling to New York to play the Giants, and you know if the Giants play it the way that they played last week, they actually might be able to squeak out a victory. But that is a might, and I don't think that Russell Wilson will play that good. I think he'll be back in Denver format, and I think that Kansas City will be able to pull out their first game of the year. I would think that they'd be able to beat this team. But you never know, I guess. But overall, give me the Chiefs.
Yeah, the Giants did look better last week. The Giants' offense was actually dominating that Cowboys defense. So maybe Kyler Murray will do that this week. But yeah, this shouldn't be close. The Chiefs, I think, will get their first win of the season, and I expect it. They're a much better team in the end. So, but the final game of the week, Monday Night Football, is a great one. It is the Detroit Lions playing away at the Baltimore Ravens. I'm going to be taking the Ravens in this one. I think that they've looked really good. I think Lamar's looked really good. Derrick Henry coming off a bad week, he's going to be determined to bounce back in a big way. And the Detroit Lions, don't get me wrong, I still think they're really good. I think they're going to have a great season, but definitely am more trusting of the Baltimore Ravens at this stage of the season.
Yeah, I mean, I will say the Browns might have figured out the formula for everyone to stop Derrick Henry.
Have Mason Graham.
I don't have Mason Graham, and guess what? The Lions don't have Mason Graham. So give me the Baltimore Ravens. I think that the Ravens will get it done, especially at home. They're just a powerhouse team. They have powerhouse players. Zay Flowers is balling at the moment. He's like the top player in receiving yards. I think it's only 2 weeks, but
I think it's
you know
probably
he's been. Well, it might not
the
be
Giants receiver, Mavis.
Malik Neighbors. He did have a monstrous game last week. But yeah, overall, give me the Ravens. Just dominant. And Lamar Jackson is going to win another MVP, probably.
There we go.
And that concludes the video, guys. Thank you guys so much for watching yet another LA Fakers YouTube video. We hope you guys enjoyed. As always, it is Jack of Fat 9 and James Jam signing out. But before we do, is there anything you'd like to say?
Go Browns.
Yes, sir. Um, and as always, without further ado, good. Bye.